Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cracking open some really foundational concepts from a pretty key document in the security and privacy world.
We are indeed. That's NIST Special Publication 853, Revision 5. It's a huge catalog of security and privacy controls.
Huge is right.
Yeah. And while it's, heavily used in the U.S. government, the ideas, the controls themselves, they're incredibly relevant for pretty much any organization trying to build or manage systems handling sensitive info or PII.
Absolutely. And our mission today for this deep dive is to take the source materials you've shared with us, these excerpts from 853, and sort of act as your guides. We want to pull out the key insights, the practical bits, guidance for building systems that are secure, yes, but also respect privacy. Think of it as getting a solid handle on the building blocks straight from the text you gave us.
That's the plan. We're sticking strictly to what's in these materials. No outside stuff, just helping you navigate what's here, make sense of this pretty detailed landscape.
Okay, so here's how we'll tackle it. We'll start with some of the bigger ideas, the ones presented early on, how controls are organized, core concepts like trustworthiness.
Right. Setting the stage.
Exactly. Then we'll pivot and really dig into specific examples of controls that your sources highlight. We'll look at different families, explain what the controls mean, why they matter, and how they all kind of connect.
Sounds like a good approach. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's start with that foundational landscape.
Yeah.
How is this catalog actually structured? It looks pretty extensive.
It really is. So the basic structure is this library of controls, right? And they're grouped into what they call families.
Families.
Yeah, each family gets a two-letter code, like AC for access control, or CM for configuration management, SI for system and information integrity, and so on.
Okay.
And then within each family, you've got individual controls with numbers, like AC3. And sometimes controls have enhancements, which are like specific additions or clarifications, and those get numbers in parentheses, like AC314.
Got it. So families, group-related stuff, then numbers for specifics. Now, the source material makes a point right at the start about the order of things. What's the deal there?
Yes. This is really important to grasp up front. The document is very explicit. The order in which families appear, or the order of controls within a family. It doesn't mean anything about importance or priority.
Oh, okay. So just because AC comes before, say, SI.
Exactly. It doesn't mean access control is more critical than system integrity, or that you should do AC first. It's not a sequence, not a logical progression. It's just the order they ended up in the catalog.
That's a key point. It's not a step-by-step manual, more like a toolbox.
Precisely. It's a reference catalog. Organizations need to look at their own systems, their mission, their risks, and select the controls that make sense for them. Tailoring is key. Your risk assessment tells you what's important, not the table of contents.
Right. You pick the tools for the job. Now, speaking of tailoring, the document uses specific terms for how organizations adapt these controls. I saw assignment operations.
Yes, good catch. This is how this standard builds in flexibility. You'll see text in brackets like assignment, organization defined. That's an assignment operation. It means the organization has to fill in the blank. They need to define or specify something concrete.
Like how often to do a review.
Exactly. It could be an organization-defined frequency, or a list of organization-defined personnel or roles, or the specific organization-defined systems or components it applies to. The standard says what needs to be done, but the organization decides the how often, who, or where based on their context.
Okay. And there's another type, selection.
Right. Selection, one or more. That means the organization chooses one or more options from a list provided right there in the control text.
So the big takeaway here is that 853 provides the framework, the what, but the organization absolutely has to customize the how and where based on their own risk analysis. It really centers everything on risk management.
It absolutely does. Tailoring isn't optional, really. Now, let's talk about a concept that kind of weaves through everything, highlighted in section 2.5. Trustworthiness and assurance.
Trustworthiness.
Yeah.
Sounds a bit abstract for a system. What do they mean by that?
Well, the source defines it as being worthy of being trusted to fulfill whatever requirements may be needed. It applies to components, systems, the whole enterprise. And the key idea is that it's not an afterthought. It's a fundamental quality you need to build in, and it's a core part of your risk management strategy. It goes beyond just, preventing hacks.
So it's broader than just security or privacy alone.
Much broader. The source lists a whole set of attributes. Reliability, dependability, performance, resilience, safety, security, privacy, and even survivability under adversity. It's really a holistic view.
Wow, that's quite a list.
It is, but there's a crucial catch they mention. Measuring trustworthiness only really works if your requirements are clear, complete, well-defined, and importantly, accessible. You need to be able to check if the system actually meets them.
Ah, okay, so it's not just a feeling. You have to engineer for it and be able to measure it against defined criteria. How do assurance-related controls fit in?
Right. Assurance controls help build that confidence. Confidence that the system meets its security and privacy requirements and supports the mission. They do this by helping define development steps, generating evidence about how the system works, and tracing that evidence back to the design.
So the evidence proves it works as intended.
Exactly. That evidence builds assurance confidence in the system. And that assurance supports the overall trustworthiness. It's all connected. Requirements, evidence, confidence, trustworthiness.
That makes sense. And it sounds like security and privacy teams really need to work hand in hand to achieve this, especially with PII involved.
Absolutely. The document stresses that collaboration, particularly when you're processing PII. Security focuses on protecting the system, privacy focuses on responsible data handling.
They're not fighting each other.
No, they shouldn't be. They're partners. They need to work together to pick controls that meet both security goals, like confidentiality, and privacy goals, like transparency or access rights, managing risks to the organization and the individual.
Okay. That foundational understanding really sets the stage. It's about building systems that are broadly reliable and safe, collaborating on security and privacy, especially with sensitive data. Let's look at some specific controls now, see these principles in action. Access control AC seems fundamental.
Definitely. And AC3, access enforcement, is right at the core. It's about making sure the system enforces approved authorizations for logical access.
Basically, making sure only the right people or processes get to the right stuff.
That's it. You have subjects, users, processes trying to access objects, files, devices, records. AC3 says the system has to enforce the rules about who gets access to what, at the system level, application level, service level. It's the fundamental gatekeeper.
And this is different from, like, badges for doors.
Totally different. AC is logical access inside the system. Physical access is the PE family, physical and environmental protection.
Gotcha. Now, AC3 has an enhancement, AC314, individual access, PII. That sounds really significant for privacy.
It is. It's a fantastic example of that security and privacy collaboration. AC314 requires organizations to provide ways for individuals to access their own PII that the organization holds.
Wow, so using a security control mechanism to enable a privacy right.
Exactly. It leverages access control tech to let people see their own data. The discussion notes this helps individuals understand how their data is used and, crucially, check if it's accurate. It's about transparency and accuracy.
And the mechanism could be what, a web portal? A form?
Could be various things. Yeah, request forms, application interfaces, whatever the organization defines. But the source also adds some nuance. Well, it mentions consulting privacy officials and legal counsel about potential limits, like maybe for law enforcement records. And critically, it requires authenticating the individual first. You need to make sure the person asking for the data is that person.
Right. Security protecting privacy again, balancing access with verification.
Precisely. It's a great example.
Okay, so AC314 shows how intertwined this is. But once someone has access, even if it's authorized, how do we limit what they can do? Least privilege, right? AC6.
You got it. AC6, least privilege. One of the absolute cornerstones of security. The idea is simple. Grant users only the minimum permissions they need to do their specific job functions. Nothing extra.
Why isn't it so critical?
It minimizes the damage. If an account gets compromised, or even if an authorized user makes a mistake, the potential harm is limited because they only had minimal privileges to begin with. It contains the blast radius, so to speak.
Makes sense. And there are specific enhancements for this.
Yes. AC6.2, non-privileged access for non-security functions, is a really important one. It says users with privileged accounts think admins. Security folks must use regular non-privileged accounts for everyday tasks that don't require those high privileges.
So the sysadmin shouldn't be browsing the web or checking email while logged in as root or administrator.
Exactly that. The why is clear. It drastically limits exposure. If you click a malicious link while using your admin account, the malware gets admin rights immediately. If you do it with your regular user account, the damage is contained to what that account can do.
Ah, segregating duties even for the same person. based on the task.
Right. It ties into role-based access control concepts. Privileges are for specific tasks, not just people.
And this isn't a one-and-done setup, is it, managing privileges?
Not at all. That's where AC67, Review of User Privileges, comes in. It mandates reviewing accounts at an organization-defined frequency. You have to check regularly, maybe quarterly, maybe annually. Are these privileges still needed? Has the person's role changed? Did someone leave? It requires ongoing vigilance.
And logging.
AC69.
Yep, log use of privilege functions. This creates an audit trail. If someone uses admin rights to change a critical setting, you need a record of who did it, when. It provides accountability and helps detect misuse. These all work together with NC2 account management, ensuring accounts are set up right, privileges are minimal, used carefully, reviewed, and logged.
Okay, so controlling access, minimizing privileges, reviewing constantly fundamental stuff. Let's shift to System and Information Integrity, SI. What jumps out from your material there?
SI2, flaw remediation, is absolutely vital. It's about finding, reporting, and fixing flaws, vulnerabilities in systems, testing the fixes, making sure they get into your configuration management, basically patching.
And the key part seems to be the timing.
Exactly. SI2C requires installing security updates within an organization-defined time period after they're released. It's not when you get around to it.
Right.
You have to set a policy, maybe 48 hours for critical stuff, 30 days for lower risk, whatever fits your risk profile, and stick to it.
Yeah.
Because the attackers aren't waiting. It's definitely a race against the bad guys. Patch before they exploit.
That's the game. And the discussion notes this isn't just for vendor patches, but also flaws you find yourself through testing or monitoring. You need that defined response window.
Makes sense. What about actively looking for problems? SI4, system monitoring.
Right. SI4 is about monitoring systems for signs of trouble, malicious activity, unusual behavior. Your source highlights a couple of interesting enhancements. SI412 is automated organization-generated alerts.
What does that mean? Beyond just system logs.
Yeah, it's more sophisticated. It involves setting up automated ways to trigger alerts, potentially using information from outside the system being monitored. It alerts specific people or roles when certain defined inappropriate or unusual activities happen.
So correlating events, maybe. Or using threat intel.
Could be. The discussion contrasts it with basic system alerts. This points towards integrating information, maybe suspicious activity reports, insider threat flags, and automating the notification to the right team, like security ops or privacy officers. It's about moving to proactive alerting based on potentially subtle indicators.
It requires some setup, I bet. And SI418, analyze traffic for covert exfiltration. That sounds advanced.
It is. This one requires analyzing outbound network traffic, both at the edge and at internal points, specifically looking for covert ways data might be smuggled out. The discussion explicitly mentions things like steganography, hiding data inside other files or traffic.
Wow, so looking for hidden messages, essentially, not just known bad patterns.
Exactly. Standard monitoring might miss data hidden this way. This control pushes for deeper inspection, maybe behavioral analysis, looking for anomalies at key network points to catch sophisticated data theft techniques. It recognizes that adversaries try to be sneaky.
That's definitely stepping up the monitoring game. Still in SI, let's talk SI19, de-identification. That's squarely in the privacy domain.
It is. De-identification is about removing the links between data and the individual it describes. SI19A says you remove organization-defined elements of PII from datasets.
Makes sense. Reduce risk by getting rid of identifiers you don't need.
Right, but the crucial part is SI19B. You have to evaluate the effectiveness of your de-identification process regularly at an organization-defined frequency.
Why? If you remove the names, isn't it done?
But here's the nuance. The discussion points out there's always residual risk. Techniques for re-identifying people get better over time. More data becomes available publicly. What was effectively de-identified 5 years ago might be re-identifiable today by combining it with other data sets.
Okay, so you need to keep checking if your methods are still strong enough against current tech.
Exactly. De-identification isn't a one-time magic wand. Its effectiveness needs ongoing assessment against the evolving threat landscape and data analysis capabilities.
That's a really important reality check. One more from SI and the sources. SI10, information input validation.
Yes. Foundational web security, really. SI10 requires checking the validity of data that comes into the system from users or external sources.
Oh yeah, checks.
Checking the syntax and semantics. Is it the right type of data, the right length? Does it contain weird characters? Does it fall within an expected range? The source gives a simple example. If a field expects a number from 1 to 100, it should reject ABC or 5,000.
And this prevents common attacks.
Absolutely. The discussion explicitly says improper input validation is a major vulnerability. Attackers try to inject malicious commands or code snippets into input fields, things like SQL injection or cross-site scripting. SI10 is about blocking that garbage data before it can cause harm, a primary defense.
Crucial for application security. Okay, let's switch families again. Identification and authentication IA. Verifying identity.
Right. And IA3, device identification and authentication, is key here. It's about uniquely identifying and authenticating devices before they can connect, not just users, but the actual machines.
Why authenticate the device itself?
It adds a layer of trust. Before the user even logs in, you want to know what is connecting. Is it a company laptop, a personal phone, a potentially malicious device? Authenticating the device gives you context for enforcing policy. Is this endpoint trusted?
Makes sense. You need to know what's knocking on the door. Methods like MC addresses or stronger stuff.
The source mentions both. Shared info like MECIP addresses, but acknowledges they can be spoofed. Then stronger methods like 802.1x with certificates or Kerberos.
And IA8 applies this same idea to external folks.
Yep. IA8, identification and authentication, non-organizational users. If customers, partners, whoever need access, you need to uniquely identify and authenticate them too, at a level appropriate to the risk.
Okay, now IA12, identity proofing. This sounds like it happens before someone even gets an account.
It does. Identity proofing is about verifying someone is who they claim to be during the enrollment or registration process, making sure you're not creating an account for a fake person. Your source highlights IA 12.6, accepting externally proved identities.
Externally proved, meaning someone else already checked their ID.
Sort of. It means your organization can accept identity proofing done by another trusted organization or agency if that proofing meets your required level of assurance. The discussion notes this helps efficiency, avoids redundant checks, and is key for things like federated identity.
So you can trust another organization's vetting process if it's good enough, letting users log in more easily across systems.
Exactly. It streamlines things while still trying to ensure the digital identity is tied back to a real, verified person, which is the core goal of IA12.
Got it. Okay, let's move to managing the actual system components, hardware, software, configuration management, CM. What's critical here?
Well, you can't secure what you don't know you have, right? So CM12, System Component Inventory, is absolutely foundational. Develop and maintain a detailed list of all your components. Hardware, software, firmware.
It needs to be detailed, not just a name.
Oh, yeah. CM12A5 says it needs organization-defined information for effective accountability. The discussion lists examples. System it belongs to, software version, owner, hardware model, serial number, location, network address, maybe even cost and supplier.
And it sounds like a lot of tracking.
It is, but think about why. Version numbers are crucial for patching, SI2. Location helps with physical security, PE, and maintenance, MA. Supplier info relates to supply chain risk, SR. A good inventory gives you the context you need to manage risks effectively.
And it has to be kept up to date.
Absolutely. CM12B requires review and updates at an organization-defined frequency. Systems aren't static. Things change. The inventory has to reflect reality.
Right. What about CM12.9, assignment of components?
This requires formally assigning each component to a specific system and getting an acknowledgement from the person responsible for that system. The discussion flags the risk. Unassigned components get forgotten, don't get patched, become vulnerabilities. Shadow IT is a classic example.
So everything needs an owner and needs to be formally part of a managed system. Accountability.
That's the key. Knowing what you have, where it is, who owns it. Now, once you have that inventory, how do you manage changes? That's CM9, configuration change control.
The formal change management process.
Exactly. Proposing, justifying, approving, implementing, testing, reviewing changes. It covers baseline changes, component swaps, software updates, vulnerability fixes, the whole life cycle. And importantly, detecting unauthorized changes.
That process prevents accidental breakage or introducing vulnerabilities.
Ideally, yes. And CM97, review system changes, adds another layer. It requires reviewing system changes periodically or after specific events, specifically to detect unauthorized modifications. Did something change outside the approved process?
So it's a check on the process itself, catching anything that slipped through or went rogue.
Precisely. It might use change logs or system monitoring data, SI4, to spot discrepancies. Layered defense.
Makes sense. Another CM control is CM11, least functionality. Sounds related to least privilege.
Very related conceptually. The principle is, Configure systems to provide only the essential capabilities they need. Turn off everything else.
Reduce the attack surface.
Exactly. CM11.1 periodic review reinforces this. You need to review the system regularly again. Organization-defined frequency to find unnecessary functions, ports, protocols, software services, and then disable or remove them. Less stuff running means fewer potential holes for attackers to exploit. Simplicity reduces risk.
Right. Keep it lean. Okay, shifting focus to protecting the data itself. System and Communications Protection, SC. Protecting data at rest.
That's SC28, Protection of Information at Rest. Goal: prevent unauthorized access or modification of data sitting on hard drives, databases, backup tapes, etc.
And encryption is the main tool.
It's the primary method highlighted in SC28.1, cryptographic protection. Use crypto, usually encryption, for defined information on defined components or media. If the laptop is stolen or the backup tape lost, encryption makes the data useless to whoever finds it. The strength should match the data sensitivity.
And you can encrypt files, disks, databases.
Yeah, the discussion mentions that flexibility. Encrypt files, records, fields, whole disks, whatever makes sense based on the risk in the system.
Okay. And data moving across the network.
That's SC8, transmission confidentiality and integrity. Protecting data while it's in transit.
Just for external traffic. Or internal, too.
Both. The discussion is clear. Internal and external networks. Think about data going between servers to printers, anywhere it moves. Unencrypted traffic can be sniffed or altered.
And protection methods.
Could be physical, like secured cabling, but usually logical, meaning encryption again. SC81 specifically calls out using cryptography to protect confidentiality and integrity during transmission. Things like TLS SSL for web traffic, VPNs, etc. Data needs protection everywhere, not just when stored.
Crypto is definitely a recurring theme. Any other interesting SC controls in your sources? SC27, Platform Independent Applications.
Yeah, this one's about including applications designed to run on multiple different underlying platforms, different hardware, different operating systems.
Why is that a security control? Portability.
Portability leads to resilience, which enhances availability. If your main platform goes down due to an attack or failure, a platform-independent app might be able to run on a backup or alternative system more easily. It's about being able to reconstitute services.
Clever. Architectural resilience. Now, SC30, concealment and misdirection, sounds really cool, like deception tech.
It really does. This control is about using organization-defined concealment and misdirection techniques to confuse and mislead attackers.
Honeypots. Fake systems.
Could be things like that, yes. The discussion says these techniques can mess with attacker targeting, limit their opportunities, make the real attack surface harder to find or understand. Virtualization is mentioned as a way to disguise systems. The idea is to proactively make the attacker's job harder, introduce uncertainty, maybe make them reveal themselves.
Actively playing defense, making the environment confusing. I like it. What about SC36, distributed processing and storage?
Similar goal. Resilience through architecture. SC36 requires spreading out organization-defined processing and storage across multiple physical locations or logical domains.
So not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. The discussion says this increases the work factor for attackers. To cause major disruption, they have to hit multiple targets, which is harder. It allows for parallel operations and makes the system more resilient to attacks trying to knock out processing or data access.
Building resilience in. Lastly, for SC43, sensor capability and data. Very relevant today.
Extremely relevant. This tackles the security and privacy risks of sensors and devices, microphones, cameras, GPS, accelerometers, especially on mobile devices.
The risk being covert activation.
Yes. An attacker secretly turning on a mic or camera is a huge risk for spying, collecting sensitive info. GPS tracking is another obvious one. Sensors are useful, but they're also potential surveillance tools.
So what does the control require?
Your source highlights two enhancements. SC43.1 says verify sensor data only goes to authorized people, secure the data flow, and SC43.2 says use organization-defined measures to ensure sensor data is used only for authorized purposes.
So the work phone's GPS data for tracking trucks isn't used to monitor personal weekend trips.
That's the idea. The discussion suggests measures like extra training for those handling the data or contractual limits. It's about putting boundaries around sensor data collection and use to protect privacy.
We've really hit a lot of different areas, AC, SI, IA, CM, SC, just from these excerpts.
It shows how broad 853 is and how these things connect. We even touched on implications for other families like PM, program management, MA, maintenance, PE, physical, PT, privacy, RA, risk assessment, SA, system acquisition, SR, supply chain, it's a whole ecosystem.
Okay, so let's try to bring this all together. What are the big recurring themes for someone trying to actually use this guidance?
Well, one thing that jumps out is the constant refrain of organization defined. Frequency, personnel, systems, criteria, mechanisms, it's everywhere. Meaning this isn't a paint-by-numbers checklist. You have to tailor it. You need to analyze your own risks, your mission, your data, your tech, and make specific choices. Risk management drives the implementation. It's not one size fits all.
Right, and documentation and ongoing work seem huge too.
Absolutely. So many controls require documented policies, procedures, plans, and the need for regular review and updates is constant AC6 privilege reviews, CM9 change reviews, SI2 patching timelines, SI19 D8 effectiveness checks, PM31 monitoring. Security and privacy aren't static. They need continuous effort.
Compliance isn't a one-time thing, it's a continuous process.
Exactly. You don't achieve security and then stop. You maintain a posture.
So it's clear that implementing these controls isn't just about buying software or hardware. It's deeply about policy, process, people, and that continuous vigilance.
Couldn't have said it better. And think back to those big ideas like trustworthiness or secure evolvability. SA88 mentioned designing systems to stay secure as they change. Building security and privacy in from the start, planning for change, makes the whole thing more manageable and resilient over time. Bolting it on later is way harder and less effective.
It feels like these controls, when implemented thoughtfully, are the practical ways to build systems that are genuinely more resilient, more responsible with data, and ultimately more trustworthy.
That's the goal. Whether you're using this knowledge for a specific project, just trying to understand the field better, or you're responsible for systems yourself, these controls give you a framework. A way to talk about, evaluate, and improve how organizations protect information and privacy in a really complex world.
We've covered a massive amount of ground in this deep dive into NIST SP 853. Foundational ideas, specific controls across many families, the emphasis on organizational choice, documentation, ongoing effort.
Yeah, hopefully this gives you a clearer map of some of the critical terrain in this document. It's definitely detailed, complex stuff, but understanding these pieces is just essential for managing risk well.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, pulling from our discussion today. We talk about how building trustworthiness relies on having clear, accessible requirements. So how does understanding these granular controls like AC314 for PII access or SI418 for covert exfiltration detection, how does that help you define better requirements or ask sharper questions about the systems you rely on or maybe the systems you help build?
Something to think about. There's always more to learn, more to apply.
Indeed. Thanks so much for bringing these sources and walking us through them. Hope this has been helpful for everyone listening.
My pleasure.
Until the next deep dive.